If you're looking for a powerful gaming laptop that is also not too clunky, chances are that these two laptops will come to mind: MSI's GS66 Stealth and the ASUS ROG Zephyrus M15. Now both are fairly thin, they're light, they have a very professional and clean look to them, but also really good laptops overall. Both start at around $1,700 or 2,000 euros, with top spec versions going up to 3K or even beyond, and that will vary a bit depending on where you live. But generally, you should expect to pay roughly the same for both of these laptops. But both of them also have their own upsides and downsides that you should consider before just running to the store and buying them. I already reviewed both of these separately, so if you want to learn even more about them, I'll leave the links up here and in the description down below, because this video today is pretty much about how these two compare to each other. Let's begin. This video is brought to you by Cooler Master and their MH630 gaming headset. The MH630 is a sleek-looking headset that offers great sound and plenty of bass. It is really comfortable, even if you play for hours, and it actually offers one of the best microphones I've found at this $60 price point. Check it out using the links in the description below. In terms of size and weight, they're actually pretty similar. The MSI is a couple of millimeters thinner, but the difference is too small to really notice it. They weigh roughly the same as well, so neither wins at being more portable than the other. MSI's metal finish does look and feel a little bit more premium than the plastic top on the M15, but it's also very sensitive to fingerprints. Still, I do think that MSI just makes a slightly better stealthy impression. On the other hand, I actually prefer the inside of the M15. MSI sticks to the clean metal, but the extra soft touch coating that ASUS uses does feel a bit softer, and it's actually less sensitive to fingerprints. In terms of actual build quality, there isn't much between them. Both have a solid hinge, minimal flex in the screen, and minimal flex in the chassis, so they are just really well built. Both have good connections as well, with Ethernet, HDMI, and 3 fast Type A ports, so that is plenty for most gamers and creators. MSI does score some extra points by having 2 Type-C headers versus 1 on the M15 here. Now, I personally find a good keyboard very important on a laptop, as it will affect your gaming as well as the work you do, and thankfully, that's something both of these laptops do very well. There is a reasonable travel on both, the actuation just feels pretty good, and both are really easy to get used to. MSI's per key RGB looks a bit nicer, as on the M15 you can only control the color of the entire keyboard. I just wish that on the GS66 they added dedicated volume buttons that the M15 does have. For the touchpad, MSI takes the win for me. Now both feel pretty good, they're both with a glass surface and similar in terms of responsiveness, but MSI's touchpad is a bit larger and the clicking does feel a bit better. Now when it comes to the CPU, there are actually several possible choices. Entry-level GS66 and M15 models come with a 6-core Intel Core i7-10750H. The top-end M15 has an 8-core i7, and the top-end GS66 has an 8-core i9. Now, while the i9 and i7 suggest that they are very different, they're actually very much the same, with only a tiny clock speed difference between them on paper. Now, in reality, with Intel pretty much being stuck on 14 nanometers, both of these laptops will be limited by cooling more than anything, so it is really unlikely that you will see big differences between the two 8-core CPUs. On the other hand, between the 8-core and the 6-core options, expect top models to be roughly 15 to 20% faster in heavy CPU benchmarks, so they are better options if you need a lot of raw CPU power. But if you mostly care about gaming, it's not really worth paying a lot more just for the 8-core CPU. On the GPU side, however, both of these start out with an RTX 2060. If you're worried about not having budget for a more expensive option, don't be, because mobile RTX 2060 is a really decent GPU actually. It is able to play those big AAA titles at reasonable settings, or lighter games at high frame rates to make use of these new high refresh rate displays. Both can also be bought with an RTX 2070 Max-Q or an RTX 2070 Super Max-Q, and the GS66 even comes with an RTX 2080 Super Max-Q, if you're willing to spend some serious money, that is. However, there is another difference between these two. ASUS is using 90-watt versions of each GPU, while MSI is using 80-watt versions. Higher power means higher clock speeds and ultimately a bit better gaming performance. As you can see in some benchmarks here, a 90-watt RTX 2070 Super Max-Q can actually get really close to the 80-watt RTX 2080 Super Max-Q, or in some games even beat it. So, when you're deciding between these two laptops with the exact same graphics chip, expect frame rates to be a tiny bit better on the ASUS ROG Zephyrus M15. ASUS doesn't support switchable graphics on the M15, while the MSI does on the GS66, and that gives MSI a slight edge when it comes to battery life in those applications that do need to use the GPU a bit, like you can see in the PC Mark 8 benchmark. The battery is also larger, 99.9 watt-hour on the MSI versus the 76 watt-hour on the ASUS, meaning that in very light use it will last a bit longer as well. It is hard to exactly say how much because that will depend on what you do, but for example, in watching Netflix, they're actually very similar, but in some mixed light use like word processing and some internet browsing, the GS66 will last about an hour longer. When it comes to your display options, these two laptops actually go into very different directions. The base model on both will actually use a very similar, I dare to say maybe even the exact same 240Hz 1080p IPS panel with a 3 millisecond response time. Now, we've seen those on several occasions already, and they're not just really nice and fast gaming panels, but they also have really good colors for some creative work as well. But if you want to spend a bit more, MSI gives you the options to go even faster with this new 300Hz display, while ASUS is giving you the options to get a 4K full Adobe RGB panel instead. Now, I have both of these higher end options here, and this is what turns them into just very different beasts. The 300Hz display on the GS66 is a bit nicer than the 240Hz panel, not just because it's a bit faster, but also because that contrast and colors are a bit better. But still, it is very much a gaming laptop. Now, the M15 with a 4K panel becomes more of a creative workstation with not as smooth gaming experience, but with those extra pixels. It's really helping out in applications like Photoshop or Adobe Premiere. And since it does cover the entire Adobe RGB range, it is actually very capable for serious color critical work as well. Both laptops are easy enough to open and score some good points for maintenance. It is easy to clean the fans, replace the battery, or add a second SSD. Still, the MSI is a bit better here, as ASUS decided to solder half the RAM and the Wi-Fi chip to the motherboard, while MSI just lets you upgrade both memory modules and the network chip if you want to. And even though it's a bit thinner, when we look at thermals and noise, MSI's cooling solution does look a bit more efficient. Like most laptops these days, the CPUs do get hot, but the GS66 holds acceptable temperatures at a much lower noise level. It is not a super quiet laptop, but the M15 gets louder. Now, thankfully, both laptops stay nice and quiet and idle or light use, although the M15 actually does do a little bit better here. Now, speaking of noise, when you compare the speakers on both of these laptops, there is one clear winner, the M15. Now, the GS66 does go very, very loud, but the sound quality on the M15 is just much nicer. It doesn't matter if you're gaming, listening to some music, or just listening to an informative video, the difference is really huge with a smooth sounding M15 really putting those larger speakers on the GS66 to shame. If you're looking for some reliable and fast external storage, SSDs are the way to go. It doesn't matter if you're just going to use them to copy some files, to work from them, for example, or to keep your games on. They're just such a useful tool to have. And I thought to do a little update because a couple of models came out since then. So I'm going to compare them today, see what features they have, see how much they can stand, and most importantly, see which ones are worth getting. It's not that they're bad for a laptop, but the M15 is a class apart. When it comes to the webcam quality though, it's the GS66 that takes the win here, mostly due to the M15 not having one. MSI's webcam isn't anything special, but it does come with an IR camera for facial recognition and Windows Hello support, so it's very practical, where on the M15 you would have to buy a separate webcam. So if you want to do some video conferences, for example, the MSI makes more sense. So that pretty much covers it, and like I said at the start, in some ways they are very similar premium laptops. They're well built, portable, they have a pretty good battery life, and the keyboard and touchpad are good on both. But there are some big differences too. The M15 scores some good points with a 4K panel option that really lets you use this gaming laptop for serious creative work as well, and since they're using a 90-watt GPU, gaming performance is going to be a little bit better than on a similarly spec'd GS66. On the other hand, the GS66 is a bit better in some other ways. Now I think the metal finish does look and feel a bit nicer. Unlike the M15, you can actually upgrade your memory and your Wi-Fi chip. You have that faster 300Hz IPS panel as an option. It's a bit quieter, and it does have an even larger battery that will last you a bit longer in most situations. Now, I don't think that you can really go wrong with either of these, especially if one is a lot better priced than the other where you live, but mostly you have to decide for yourself which of the things I talked about today are important to you, and then make your choice based on that. And hopefully, maybe next year we might see both ASUS and MSI learning from each other and making a machine that has the best of both worlds. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this comparison and about these laptops. Don't forget to subscribe, give me thumbs up, and see you in the next one, guys. Bye!